While I was buried in night shifts, counting every penny to cover the electric bill, the rent, my husband was calmly bringing another woman into our home to sleep in the very bed I bought. And yet, I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I just smiled. Think I'm crazy? Want to know why I stayed so calm? Watch this story unfold. It's packed with tension, full of sharp twists, and ends in a way no one sees coming. I'm Nora, 36. An ER nurse. I work 12-hour shifts, switching between days and nights, sometimes getting a full night's sleep just once a week. Still, I try to keep my home steady, or at least make it look that way. Jared, my husband, used to be the kind of man my friends were jealous of. Tall, polite, could cook, and used to wait outside just to give me a hug when I got home. Back then, I thought I had picked the right guy. But you know what? Dramatic love stories never start with an explosion. They start with a tiny crack, one we usually ignore. 2 years ago, Jared lost his job after company-wide layoffs. I encouraged him to take some time off, get his head straight, but that short break, it never ended. Jared decided not to look for another job. Instead, he stayed home to start something of his own. He said he had a big idea for a community connection app, then sustainable fashion design, then a healing podcast. Every week it was something new. But none of it ever made it past a PowerPoint file. Meanwhile, I was working myself into the ground. ER nurse pay isn't bad, but after rent, utilities, insurance, and everything that came with supporting my husband's dreams, there wasn't much left. I was the one buying groceries, paying taxes, covering insurance. I was the one calling the plumber when the faucet leaked. I took out the trash, changed the light bulbs, rearranged the furniture when Jared didn't have the energy. He, on the other hand, adopted another cat because being home alone is too sad, bought a brand new mic for the podcast project, and picked up an old gaming console because creativity needs relaxation too. At first, I tried reminding him, explaining things logically. Then, I just quietly paid off the credit card bills. I still tried to keep things in order. Wake up early, eat breakfast, get to work on time, come home right on schedule. Jared, meanwhile, slept until noon, ate cereal out of the bowl I set aside for him, then sat around scrolling on his iPad like someone waiting for life to come knock on his door. I used to believe everyone hits rough patches, but when that rough patch turns into a relationship where only one person is carrying all the weight, it stops being love. It becomes imbalance. The first warning sign wasn't betrayal. It was a dirty cup, left in the sink for 3 straight days, while everything else was clean. I gently asked, "You planning to wash that cup?" Jared, without even looking up, said, "You just killed my vibe." So tell me, when did keeping my kitchen clean become his excuse to do nothing? One night, I got home just before midnight. Jared was gaming, headphones on. I walked past him. He didn't look up. I saw my clothes pushed off the chair to make room for another bag of new tech gear. I stopped, took a deep breath, and I smiled. Not a happy smile, not a mocking one either. Just a thin, quiet smile, like a reflex when something feels too familiar and too pointless. From that day on, I started smiling every time I was unfairly blamed. When Jared said I washed his jeans at the wrong temperature, I smiled. When he told me sleeping in a separate bed makes him feel abandoned, I smiled. When I asked about his podcast progress and he said, "You don't have a creative mind, so don't ask," I smiled and walked out of the room. One time, Jared even asked, "Why do you keep smiling like that?" I shook my head. It's nothing. Truth is, there was a lot I wanted to say, but I knew it wouldn't matter, so I kept those words in my throat and replaced them with a smile, a long, quiet smile that didn't need explaining. People say, silence isn't empty, it's full of answers. And I stopped arguing, not because I was weak, but because I was pulling myself out of a hole. Jared didn't notice. Maybe he didn't want to. I was the one slowly wearing down in this marriage. But I was also the only one starting to see the way out. Every love story starts with hope. But what real story doesn't have scars? No one ever taught me how to walk away while still loving someone. But one thing I've come to understand, love isn't something you cling to out of laziness and call it, "You're all I need." I used to think Jared needed me. But then I realized, the person who needs me the most right now is me. Those first smiles didn't come from peace. They came from a truth I hadn't dared to name yet. I had already started pulling away from him. Bit by bit, even though my feet were still standing in place. I didn't say it out loud, not right away, but as the smiles came easier, I started seeing Jared differently. Not through the eyes of a wife who loves her husband, but like someone standing outside, looking in on her own relationship. He still wasn't working, but he was leaving the house more often. Some nights I'd get off my shift at 8 p.m. and call him on the way home. Always the same answer. I'm busy, got something to do. No explanation. No did you eat? No are you okay? One time I asked, what kind of something? He snapped, why? You trying to control me? I just smiled. I didn't ask again. They say that in a story of betrayal, the first thing to die isn't trust, it's expectation. I no longer hoped he'd have dinner ready, or even just tidy up the living room before I got home. One time I walked in and the lights were still off. Dishes were piled in the sink. My medical coat, the one I'd draped over the chair the night before, was now crusted with dried bread dough. He said he forgot to wipe it, then laughed, like it meant nothing. I didn't argue. I wasn't even tired from being angry anymore. It was the exhaustion of disappointment. Love doesn't die from one big fight. It dies slowly, from quiet indifference, dripping day after day. One night, I walked into the house after a long shift. The wind was cold. My feet were numb and shoes soaked from the snow. As I bent down to take them off, I noticed a woman's coat draped carelessly over the wooden rack. It wasn't mine. The color, the fabric, the scent, none of it matched anything I owned or had ever worn. I reached out and touched it, then spotted a smudged red lipstick stain on the collar. I didn't say anything over dinner that night, or more accurately, during the dinner I cooked for myself because Jared said he'd already eaten out. When he got home, I asked calmly, whose coat is that by the shoe rack? He looked at me for 3 seconds, then turned away. Probably a friend left it, he said. I set my lipsticks down and smiled. Yeah, probably. It wasn't the first time I smelled unfamiliar perfume in our bedroom. Wasn't the first time I found long hair in a brush I never used. But this time, I didn't try to explain it away. Sometimes infidelity doesn't need hard proof, just the feeling that you no longer belong in your own space. That night, I took my pillow to the couch. Jared asked, why are you sleeping out here? I said, just needed a change of air. I've been sleepwalking lately. He shrugged and turned away. No pushback. No sign of concern, like he'd been waiting for this day, or just didn't care anymore. I got used to sleeping under the glow from the neighbor's window. Got used to the clanking of the old heater. Got used to waking up with no one next to me. But I still showed up, still woke up at 6, still went to work, still paid every bill on time. One day, while folding towels, I caught my reflection in the mirror, eyes dull, fire gone, but wide awake. I saw a woman who was both strong and tired. Someone stuck between two places, not hurt enough to leave but nowhere near happy enough to stay. A nameless zone in love that so many women pass through. And no one ever teaches them what to do when they're there. I started talking less. Stopped sharing about the patient whose heart stopped on my shift, the one I fought to save. Stopped mentioning the sweet old woman who gave me a hand-knitted bracelet. Jared didn't ask. Our relationship turned into 2 parallel lives, only crossing paths at the kitchen counter and on the monthly bills. When he said, "You've been acting strange lately," I replied, "Not really," and smiled. When he said, "You're not as cheerful as you used to be," I answered, "Must be work." And that's how we lived. 1 house, 2 people, 2 separate worlds, 2 rhythms that no longer touched. To outsiders, maybe it looked like just a phase, but to me it was undeniable proof. I wasn't in a marriage anymore. I was just sharing space with a stranger. Neither of us said it out loud, but sometimes, the silence between 2 people who were once close hurts more than the loudest fight ever could. And I slowly began to understand. This relationship had rotted, not from acts of betrayal, but from the betrayal of indifference. I used to be someone's wife. But now, walking down that dark hallway toward the living room I sleep in, I know. I'm just living with someone I used to know. I used to think I'd gotten used to the distance in that house. That nothing could hurt me anymore. I was wrong. That afternoon, my schedule changed unexpectedly. A patient was transferred early, so I got to leave 2 hours ahead of time. I didn't text. I just wanted to come home, take a warm shower, and lie still for a while after a long, stressful day. But what was waiting for me at home wasn't rest. The front door was slightly open. I stepped inside, and the first thing I saw was a pair of unfamiliar slippers by the entryway. Small, cream-colored, younger-looking than anything I owned. A strange perfume hung in the hallway. Sweet, sharp, unfamiliar. I slowed my pace. My heart didn't race. There was just a strange sensation blooming in my chest, like I'd accidentally walked into someone else's home. And then, she appeared. A young woman, hair loosely tied back, light makeup, wearing the exact blue and white striped shirt I used to sleep in. Mine. She stepped out of the bedroom, the room I once called our home, holding a glass of orange juice. She paused when she saw me, but only for a second. Then smiled, the kind of smile you give a maid who just showed up to clean. "Hi," she said. Not a hint of embarrassment. Jared came out right after. Hair messy, t-shirt on, eyes mildly surprised but nowhere near panicked. He didn't say, "You're home early," like a man caught doing something wrong. He just shrugged and said, like he was explaining someone borrowing a car, "She's crashing here for a few days, don't make a big deal out of it." I looked at him, looked at her, then looked at myself, a woman in scrubs, exhausted, still holding my keys and the takeout I picked up on the way home. I didn't feel anger. There was no scene like I used to imagine if I were ever betrayed. No tears, no shouting, no breaking things. I just smiled, a small one, then nodded. I walked straight to the office, picked up the bag I'd kept behind the door, just in case. I didn't take anything else, didn't look back, didn't ask why, because I knew any answer would be cheaper than silence. I stepped outside, closed the door gently behind me. It was already getting dark, but I didn't feel cold. I walked for a while, then called a ride to a small hotel I'd stayed at once on a work trip. The room had a double bed, a desk, and a window overlooking the parking lot. Nothing fancy, nothing special, but quiet. I set my bag down, changed clothes, and sat on the bed. I didn't call anyone. I didn't cry. I didn't turn on the TV, didn't play music. I just sat there, staring into the stillness in front of me. Everything was quiet, like the whole world had shrunk to 4 walls, and I was the only one left breathing inside them. That night, I slept straight through. No dreams, no waking up in the middle of the night like usual. When I opened my eyes the next morning, the sunlight coming through the curtains looked ordinary. But inside, I felt something unfamiliar, like a body that had just been released from heavy armor and was now learning how to move on its own. I made a simple cup of warm water in the room, then got ready to leave. But as I unzipped my bag, it hit me. The insurance file and car papers were still in the desk drawer at home, important documents I needed to bring to the hospital to update my employee records. The one thing that forced me to go back to that house. I hesitated for a few seconds. Then I called a ride. I told myself just go in, grab the documents, and leave. No talking, no staying longer than a minute. That afternoon, I stood at my front door. It wasn't locked. I pushed it open, stepped inside, my wet rubber shoes thudding softly against the wood floor. And then I saw them. Jared sitting with his back to me in the wooden chair by the kitchen table. She was facing him, holding a spoonful of scrambled eggs. On the table, a glass of orange juice, some toast, and the jar of jam I'd bought 2 weeks ago. The TV was on, set to a morning news channel, volume low. They were eating, talking, laughing. She was using the handkerchief I once stitched my name into, wrapped around her glass of juice, so it's easier to hold. No one turned around, no one noticed the door. No one knew I was standing there, in my own house, watching 2 people sit in the exact spot I used to take after every shift, eating the exact food I once made for my family. I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel hurt. Just a hollow kind of emptiness spreading through my chest. That strange sensation of someone returning to their old nest only to realize they're no longer part of it. I stood still for a long time, watching them eat breakfast, watch TV, chat, as if I had never existed. I don't know how long I stood in that kitchen doorway. Long enough to know neither of them turned around. It was like I was a ghost, silent, invisible, not real. But then Jared looked up. Our eyes met. There was a flicker of surprise in his, but he held on to that unsettling calm, like even now, he was trying to act like thing was wrong. "You're back?" he said, like I was a guest who'd been gone a few days. I stepped further in. The light from the window cut across the kitchen floor, falling right where they sat eating. I stood in the middle of the room, a place where I used to cook, laugh, and believe I was building something that would last. Now it looked more like a flimsy stage, and I'd walked in right at the climax of someone else's play. I looked at Jared, looked at her, and I smiled. "Yes," I said, my voice light, like I was reporting the weather. "I came back to collect what's mine, and to clear out what doesn't belong." The young woman froze, fork suspended midair. Jared raised his eyebrows as if he'd misheard. "What did you say?" "I said," I repeated slowly, word by word, "you two need to get out of my house." Jared let out a dry laugh. "Get out of your house? What the hell are you talking about? You don't have that kind of right." I didn't answer. I just turned, walked to the drawer under the desk beside the kitchen, the spot where I always kept the important things. I opened it and pulled out a neat stack of documents in a folder. The rental agreement, with my name on it. The electricity bill, under my account. The home insurance policy, purchased and fully paid by me. I laid each piece of paper on the table, right between their half-eaten eggs and the unfinished orange juice. "I don't just have the right," I said. "I have every legal reason and document to ask both of you to leave, today." Jared shot to his feet, the chair scraping back with a sharp, ugly sound. "You've lost your mind," he snapped. The girls started crying, soft at first, then louder. The kind of cry that comes from someone who never thought they'd get caught, and definitely never thought they'd be told to leave a nest they thought they'd claimed. I pulled out my phone and tapped a number I'd already saved. The landlord picked up after 2 rings. "Good afternoon," I said politely. "I'd like to confirm the lock change scheduled for this afternoon. I still hold the lease, and I need to make sure I'm the only one with access to the property going forward." He confirmed it immediately, short, clear, no hesitation. I thanked him and hung up. Jared stared at me, eyes reddening. "You're really going through with this?" he asked, his voice lower now. "I'm not going to," I said, still steady, unmoved. "I'm doing it." She was the first to move. Picked up a beige purse from under the table, tears still streaking her face. She didn't look at me, didn't look at Jared. She just walked straight to the door. Not a word. Jared stood still for a long moment. Looked at the papers, looked at the kitchen, looked at me. And in the end, he said nothing. Just lowered his head and walked out slowly, as if finally carrying all the shame he'd spent so long pretending didn't exist. I didn't walk them out. I didn't lock the door behind them. I just stood there, alone, in that empty kitchen. Everything looked the same, but the air felt completely different. No more footsteps that didn't belong. No more eyes judging how I wiped the counter or washed the dishes. I washed my glass, the thick one I always used after long shifts. I opened the fridge, grabbed a couple eggs and a pack of noodles. Made a hot bowl of noodles, added some dried shallots, a little pepper, just the way my mom used to make it when I was a kid. I sat down on the kitchen chair. The same chair Jared had sat in just minutes earlier, with someone else. Now it was me. Just me. No interruptions, no tension, no one to tiptoe around. I ate slowly. Every bite was hot, flavorful, real. In that cold kitchen I had just reclaimed, I felt something I hadn't in a long, long time. Relief. The quiet power of knowing this space, this moment belonged to me. The control over where I was, what I did, and who I was becoming. I smiled. Not the quiet, exhausted smile I'd worn for months, not the tight-lipped one that came from pretending I was okay. This was different. This was the last smile. The real one. The one that comes when you finally end a chapter full of pain and step into a role that was always yours to own. A week later, I changed the locks. Not because I was afraid Jared might come back, but because I no longer wanted anyone who once treated my presence as a given to ever walk through that door again. I changed my phone number. The people who needed to reach me would know how. The rest, I let them fall away, like dust wiped off a kitchen shelf. I took down the old curtains Jared had picked. Dark, tangled patterns that always made the room feel smaller. I replaced them with thin, white fabric. The light came through softer. The house looked bigger. Easier to breathe in. I sat down and opened my laptop. Sent in a request to transfer hospitals. I chose a small medical center on the northern edge of the suburbs near the mountains I once drove past in the fall. It's quieter there. Fewer patients. No city noise, no crowds. I want each shift to begin and end in peace. A kind of peace I never realized I needed so badly. On the first night in the home that was finally mine, emotionally mine. I opened my notebook and rewrote my entire budget. I marked in red every expense I had made to support Jared's projects. Editing software he barely used, audio equipment gathering dust in the corner, social media ad packages that never delivered a single result. I cut them all. No guilt, no hesitation. Looking at it now, it felt absurd. How I had tried to save a dream that wasn't even mine, just to hold together a relationship that had already rotted from the inside out. I started learning a few new recipes. Simple, healthy, made for one. I changed my sleep playlist, deleted the gloomy piano tracks Jared used to like, swapped them for ocean waves and soft, wordless lo-fi. I set my alarm 15 minutes earlier each day, just enough time to sip warm water, open the window, and write a few lines of gratitude for the simple fact that life is still moving forward. Sometimes I thought I might cry, but I didn't. There were no more tears left to fall. Love heals when it doesn't require you to disappear so someone else can exist. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. Just one line. I miss you. I knew exactly who it was. Jared always had a way of pulling things back into the same old loop. But this time, I didn't get pulled in. I didn't respond. Didn't think twice. I just smiled, then hit delete. As easily as clearing out a junk ad from the inbox. I don't hate Jared anymore. I don't love him either. I don't wish him pain. I don't need his apology. I'm just grateful to myself for not staying one day longer in a story I no longer believed in. What I once believed we were building together turned out to be something I built, while he just watched. Jared brought another woman into my home, sat at the table I picked out, used things I worked hard to afford. And me? I smiled, not out of forgiveness, not out of grace, but because I finally understood the most valuable thing in that house, the one thing that made any of it matter, was never the furniture, the meals, or the money. It was me. Just me. And now, I've taken back everything that was mine, including my peace. Some breakups don't need tears. They don't need explanations. All they need is one clear moment, when you realize you've gone too far in abandoning yourself. I used to think enduring was part of love. That if I was kind enough, patient enough, the other person would change. But the truth is, no one changes for you if they don't believe they've done anything wrong. Being betrayed in love doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's just cold dinners, blank stares, and one person waiting endlessly for an apology that never comes. I used to smile to hide the hurt. But now, I smile because I finally chose to walk away from a relationship that was no longer healthy and come back to myself. Are you losing yourself in a love like that? Is there something you keep carrying just because you're afraid to be alone? Share your story in the comments, because what you think is just you might be exactly what someone else is silently living through too. If this story stirred something in you, made you feel, reflect, or see infidelity, betrayal, or the limits of endurance in a new light, hit like, share it, and subscribe to Love Stories so you won't miss more real, powerful stories like this one. Because everyone deserves a kind of love that makes them smile. For real.